there was something that kind of helped me in that moment to not hit the despair button and actually go, okay, I'm going to do loads of yoga nidra and I'm going to talk to people and go, is this happening for you? Because when we normalize things, that feels good. We go, you've got it, you've got it, you've got it. Okay, it's not just me. This is everyone. It was so kind of comforting to have, 20 people going, oh yeah, that's for me too. Oh, but actually mine has got a little bit better.
What kept me sane and hopeful during those lonely, bedbound months was Suzy Bolt yoga. That's what a friend told me the other day. She said, they greet every single person joining online, sometimes 50 people. And when you're alone and bedbound, just being seen like that really brings some hope and some dignity. If you're new here, I'm Raelan Agle, and this is where we dive into real stories from people moving beyond conditions like ME/CFS and Long COVID. And if you've been here a while, then you know that this space is full of kind and compassionate humans. But today's guest is next level. Oh my goodness, you are going to love her. Almost every time someone asks in my Facebook group or in the YouTube comments, like, I'm bedbound with Long COVID. How do I even begin to start to move again? The name that I hear over and over again is Suzy Bolt. So I'm so glad to be joined by Suzy today. She's tuning in from Brighton, UK. And after Long COVID turned her world upside down, she realized that the kind of support that she needed didn't exist. So she created it. And she created one of the largest live, affordable online support programs for people with chronic illness that is now serving thousands of people. Her story is about more than recovery. It's about community. It's about dignity. It's about compassion and the power of just being seen. I'm so excited to have Suzy with us here today. So let's dive in. Suzy, incredible to have you here. I am so excited for this discussion.
I am very, very pleased to be with you in sharing some time together, talking about the journey that both of us have been on. I've been admiring you from afar, Raelan, so it's a real honor to kind of spend some time with you and for us to kind of chew the breeze together.
Yeah, I've been hearing so much about you. I feel like it's long overdue that you and I have gotten together to have a discussion. So, for people who might not be aware of all that you've been through and what got you to where you are now and why you do the work that you do, tell us a bit about that.
So, the thing that sort of started this all off for me, sort of me coming into the health space in the way that I have in the past 5 years, was the sort of culmination of a long journey towards getting Long COVID and becoming very unwell, the most unwell I've probably been. But my journey didn't start with Long COVID. I was sick a lot in my life. I was sick a lot in my childhood. I then had glandular fever, which made me incredibly unwell. So that's mono if you're in the States, or Epstein-Barr virus. And I've actually realized now in retrospect that I've spent most of my adult life ill, but just navigating it as a roller coaster of, okay, well, there's better versions of me right now. And now there's really not such great versions of me. And my whole kind of energy has just been around pushing through. And I'm just going to keep going. And as soon as I get a whiff of recovery, I'm back up on my feet, doing the next project, running the next thing. And I think Long COVID was the thing that actually just went, you're not going to do that anymore. So it was a really steep learning curve for me. But, I've actually kind of surprisingly worked in the healing space for quite a long time. So, I trained as a yoga teacher nearly 30 years ago, and I've trained some counseling, and I'm an NLP master coach. And, I've always been working with kind of transformation and health and improvement. And I think the point at which I really stopped in 2020, I literally lay in bed in my darkest hour going, right, I think the way I do my life isn't working for me, and I really need to make some big changes. And I knew intuitively what I needed to do, but I've been avoiding it for a really, really long time. So my journey, I knew I couldn't do it alone. I'm someone that needs to do difficult things in community. So I set up a little community via Facebook and just had a group at the beginning of, 100 people. I remember going, oh, we've got 100 people. How nice. And we're all kind of in a similar place. sort of really sick, but not in hospital sick. And how lovely to be able to talk about it with others. And then I set up a little live class, had a couple of live kind of check-in classes a week where we got to talk about who's taking what, who's doing what. And it's just grown from there. So, it's everything that's gone on has been led by my own need and my own learning of what was going on for me and why it was going on. And sort of every year there's been another moment of, oh my goodness, I've now just learned this and I've now learned this. And, that it's been a sort of a community in learning, which is an extraordinary thing to be a part of, actually. So, yeah.
It's really interesting because so many of the recovery stories that I, hear, the people that I talk to, including my own, have a similar feel to them or trajectory. And it sounds like you went a very different route and got to skip over some of the stuff that a lot of us go through, probably because of your background and your
Right.
education and your training. But most of us get into this like waiting list for specialists and waiting for someone else to fix us and waiting for the long COVID cure and the medication that's going to come out and going through the despair, Googling, thing of hopelessness and then giving up. And, but it sounds like you had a very different understanding of it right from the start, which is spectacular.
I think I did. And actually, for many people, when they go and get the tests and they're all clear, I think it can be a really, really sort of disappointing moment in some ways, because you're like, well, I want to know what's going on with my body. And so how can you tell me I've got an all clear test? I went into the emergency room and they kind of sent me away going, after a period of time saying, well, we can see you're really sick, but there's nothing we can find. So go. For me, that was a frustrating 24 hours afterwards. And then I went, actually, this is good. This has to be good, right?
We've just lost all the viewers.
I know.
No.
I know. I am rare, right?
24 hours.
Yeah, I know. And so from that point on, actually what I did say to the consultant in A&E was, I said, do you think any of this is autonomic nervous system related? And he went, I mean, it could be. And I said, okay, well, I've got something I can work with because you're not even giving me a paracetamol. So, I'll go and I'm just going to work on what I feel intuitively needs to happen. And, I think I've got probably more than the average person, a lot of physical intuition around what my body does and doesn't need. It drew me to yoga as an undiagnosed ADHD female when I was 18. And I kind of went, oh, wow, this is the calmest I've ever felt. So I knew then instinctively I need to train in this to keep me practicing. I need this in my life. And, I needed therapy. So I learned a whole bunch of different kind of skills in that arena as well. So intuitively, I went, I need to calm myself, like my system down, because I felt like I was on fire. I felt like my body was out of control and I was on fire. So there was something that kind of helped me in that moment to not hit the despair button and actually go, okay, I'm going to work with what I feel like intuitively I have, which is an awareness of the autonomic nervous system, what's going on when it feels that dysregulated. And I'm going to do loads of yoga nidra. And I'm going to talk to people and go, is this happening for you? Because when we normalize things, that feels good. We go, you've got it, you've got it, you've got it. Okay, it's not just me. This is everyone. And I took great comfort in that. It was so kind of comforting to have, 20 people going, oh, yeah, that's for me too. Oh, but actually mine has got a little bit better, It's like, okay, this is good to hear. So I found that I could bypass a lot of the fear quite early on. And I think as well, and I was reflecting on this today when I knew what, we were going to talk together. I've actually been reprimanded over the years by doctors for not being as concerned about some symptoms, about, certain illnesses. They're like, you're very blasé about this. And I'm like, I'm literally a professional sick person. I've done sick. I've done a lot of sick. And I know the sick that's scary and I know the sick that isn't. And, pneumonia, that was pretty scary when my body really, really put me kind of into proper shutdown. My heart went odd, all sorts of stuff. And that was like a decade ago. And I went, I've got a yardstick for this. And I know that this feels like a little bit worse than that. And the virus definitely, was very odd in my body. But having got that all clear in A&E, I came back and went, okay, I'm just going to choose to not be afraid of what's going on. And of course, other things were emerging over the period of time. So I went and had a CT scan on my lung because the pain was unbearable. And they were like, can't find anything. And I was like, okay, fine. I won't be afraid of that one then. And, the various things as they were emerging, I had bleeding knuckles at some point, and I was a bit like, should I be afraid of this? And then I read about it and went, oh, okay, fine. It was just, I'm very good at not being afraid of what was going on in my body, maybe to my detriment at times. But, I did talk to my doctor quite a lot. And anything that he was kind of worried about, he'd be like, okay, why don't we do some bloods? Why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? And it would always come back the same, like, can't find anything. Okay, good. So I think I was probably quicker to come to reassurance than many people are. And actually, here's the thing that really changed it for me. It was listening to Nicole Sachs. I literally, ADHD, I'll pay attention to something for a short amount of time. And I heard everything that I needed you need to heal everything. And I went, okay, there we go. That's everything I need to know right now. I don't just need to heal the illness in my body. I need to heal all of the stuff that's gone on in my life that I'm holding. I have a very beautiful ex-husband, but we had 10 years of very, very difficult marriage, which had been sitting in my body. Like, it started the pneumonia a decade prior. And it was just a whole load of stuff. There was a whole load of things that I just held on to. And I kind of went, right, I've got nothing better to do right now with my hands because I'm not very well. I might as well just crack on with sorting out some of the mess in my kind of emotional cupboard. So that was my calling, really, to just go, okay, as I peel off these layers of things that have kind of held me underwater, I started to feel like my body could begin to heal. But until then, I can remember saying to my husband when I was at my most unwell, the timing is a bit weird, but I think we need to separate now. And I know, like, it's lockdown and we can't leave, and you're kind of feeding me and keeping me alive, which is great. Please don't stop doing that. But I think we need to draw a line now because I don't think I'm going to get better unless I say this out loud. And that was the beginning of the healing, I think, because it was literally crushing me being in the position that we were in together at that point. And it's great now. It's beautiful. We have a really lovely friendship, just to get that one clear. But yeah, I was like, I'm not going to get better until I say these words. We need to finish our marriage.
How brave to say that in that moment. I suspect this is resonating for a lot of people. I know it is for me because I've been in
Yeah.
places where I'm in my health journey where I've been in a not good relationship,
Yeah.
but I can barely feed myself,
Yeah.
get myself to the bathroom. How am I going to break up with somebody and move out and deal with all of that? So it's this feeling of being trapped in your circumstances. And at the time, I didn't understand the connection between all of it, of
Yeah.
how being trapped in that circumstance was also keeping me trapped in a health circumstance. But it can feel very like you have no options. So I think
Perfect.
that's incredible that you found a way to voice that
I
despite
mean,
not being ready to act on it.
I rehearsed it in my head for a long time, lying in a dark room. And then, it was so clear. I was so unwell. And it was so clear to me because it just kept coming up in the forefront of my mind like an LCD display screen. You've got to say it. You've got to do it now. It's now. Otherwise, you might not get better. This thing might not change. And I just, at one point, had the courage, the words I'd been rehearsing. I always say, whenever anyone talks to me about having difficult conversations, I say, know what your first three words are and just start with that. Make sure they're gentle, they're loving, but just start. And I had my first three words. And at some point I just went, oh God, I'm saying them. And the conversation just started. And it was a really important turning point for me. Yeah.
Incredible. I'm also curious about, because when you're talking about how you said, I knew that I was going to need to have people around me. This is
Yeah.
how I am to get through this. And I was thinking, how incredible. I want more people around me. I think all of us,
Yeah.
most of us, we're social beings. We're looking
Right.
for that community, but it
Yeah.
can be a very challenging thing to do when you're unwell and isolated and
Yeah.
trying to find that online and trying to find a space that's healthy
Mm,
versus not. So,
yes.
any suggestions or insights on how to find healthy communities in an online space when that's all you're capable of at the moment?
Well, I think, for me, in some ways, I was lucky because March 2020, I caught the virus at the end of March and had gone online quite soon after I'd started to be unwell, and found, there's a sort of a big Facebook group, isn't there? The Long Covid support group, I think they're called, and there's around 65,000 people in it now. When I first joined, I think there was about 3 or 4,000 people, and I was like, ooh, oh my God, okay, there's people like me who've got all of these different symptoms. This is really helpful. And then after maybe a few weeks of being there, I went actually reading about everyone's grief. Now, there were, if we think back to 2020, there was grief. People were dying. So we had the relatives of people who had died in that group, as well as people with symptoms who were living the experience of being ill. And I'm deeply empathic. And I went, if I stay here, this could potentially drown me, because I'm going to want to try and fix everyone. And I was just like, okay, no. So I just set up my own group. It was like, okay, what do I need? Well, it doesn't exist, I don't think. So I'm just going to go, here's a little group where we're going to look at the things that we can do to help ourselves. And we're going to share tips and resources, but maybe not focus so much on the loss, the grief, the fear, the terror that was very, very prevalent right then. So it was a kind of a little oasis space. And anyone that I guess is looking to do that now, do try and set up your own space. These online platforms are fantastic for it. And you can kind of go, these are the kind of guiding principles of how I want to interact. Maybe you set up a group that's, called Play for people who are chronically ill, and you're just going to maybe kind of hang out with people who want to play board games or, or share really funny films that you've watched that actually really make you feel better. So I think we're really lucky, and I can remember being there in 2020 thinking, my God, thank God for social media right now. More than at any point in my life, obviously I'm a lot older than social media, but to have had the pandemic happen when we had the ability to connect, it just meant that so many people could reach out and have a handheld, just as they were kind of going under. And it was like, okay, no, wait, because I'm going to tell you something positive. There was people who've been doing this and actually things have changed. So don't give up hope. Just hold on a little bit longer.
Oh.
And it's been an incredible kind of journey to watch that and to interact with people. I mean, that's one of the things with Facebook that's really interesting is that you talk, I've been talking to people for 5 years all over the world, who kind of just land in a group and go, hi. You're like, oh, hello. And, I'm just another woman, who's talking to all of these other women and men and just interacting and sharing stories and, learning from each other. And I think it's been an extraordinary journey. I would love someone to kind of download, a period of social media, some of the groups, and just download the learning journey that the communities around the world have gone on, from that point in early 2020 to now, the sort of the difference in the content and the conversations and the learning and the wisdom and how it's grown, because it's a real document. It's an artifact of a pandemic, that should be really sort of paid attention to, because if you track every single one of those groups and the conversation content through it, the learning has been extraordinary. The sharing, the vulnerability, the fear, it's an extraordinary thing,
Yeah, it would be quite the thing
Being a
to.
librarian is kind of, like, we need to capture this.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be fascinating to see a study of that over time. And for
Right.
people listening and watching, it can be an incredible thing if you're not in some of these spaces. I've interviewed quite a few people that were in a really low place and then connected with a stranger online. And then they became each other's lifeline. And they just check in every day like, hey, buddy, how you doing? And just those little things got them really far. However, that being said, there are also a lot of online spaces that do not have that feel and are not recovery focused, and with a lot of people who are really hurting, and it's might not. So just if you're in a space and it doesn't feel like it's helping you or it doesn't have the vibe that you want, keep looking, because there are tons out there. So make sure you're in one that's serving you and that your gut says like, yeah, this is good for me.
Totally. I would also say that I think there comes a point, and I talk about this a lot with people in my community, how being in some of the groups where people really are suffering, and And there's a natural instinct for a lot of very sensitive people to feel like they need to help people. And I said, if you're trying to help people around the world before you've helped yourself, you're going to be giving away really valuable energy. So if you're sort of becoming slightly hyper focused on trying to save everyone on your own journey, there's not everyone can do that, because a lot of people go, well, isn't that what you did? And I'm like, okay, let's just put me aside for 1 minute, because actually there was something that's probably a little bit different about my brain. But actually, I see a lot of people who go, oh, when I find the right group, I came out of all of the other groups because I realized I was just in there trying to firefight for other people. And it was like, actually, that's exhausting. It's exhausting, and you shouldn't do it. And if that's what you're doing, if you're spending a lot of day online just trying to offer their life ring for someone else,
Yeah.
that means you're not looking after yourself enough. That time should be for us first.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm thinking too about, so there's so many of us in these spaces and these groups doing the work like you do, who are helping people with all of these conditions to move past them, but it's so misaligned with much of the conventional medical
Yeah.
system. So it's a very interesting time to be navigating these conditions. It's great because we have so much information and the science is there, but almost nobody knows it, especially probably your doctor. So
Yes.
I guess, first tell us a bit about the work that you're doing now and then how you find that jives with this misalignment that's happening, or the disconnect with much of the mainstream medical system.
So it's a really, and I know that you find this too, because all of your recovery stories, the ones that feature on your channel, there's such a common theme around nervous system regulation, healing the traumas from your past, whatever they are, understanding how your body works, understanding how your brain works, and coming to it from a 360 perspective. So not just waiting for the drug that will dampen a symptom, take that. If you can find one that works, great. But also coming to, actually, when we get our brains to work with us as well, that can also make a huge difference. And I think it's important to say that not for everyone, but for a really big chunk of people. And it is so worth trying out. But we are pioneering in that space. Yeah, because, if the kind of stuff that we talk about, people went to their doctors and talked about, the doctors would just go, really? Who have you been talking to? And I know that there's a very big part of the patient group, maybe from people who've been ill for much longer than a lot of people with long COVID, who didn't have access to this information early on, and are like, this information is misinformation. Don't make it all about the mind, and don't tell us it's a psychological illness. And I think there's a huge misunderstanding of that as well. And it's a really sensitive and fragile space to kind of be vocal in. So one of the things I do is try to keep my voice quite quiet. I'm just, sometimes I'm a bit like, I'm just over here doing my thing. If you hear about me or find out about me, you'll find me. Like, I have a very big belief, what's meant for you will come to you. So like, come to me if you're interested. But if you're not, then I'm not going to make you. I'm not here to change your mind. But the thing that I see again and again is when people really begin to understand the role of the brain in illness, how the neural pathways change to keep you safe. And then we kind of need to manually upgrade, especially if you've been running that program for a really long time. You do need to manually upgrade. And actually, whilst a lot of people go, oh, NLP, that's like the work of the devil. I did a lot of training in NLP and I've been fascinated by it. The thing that I realized was there's the piece called the reticular activating system, which is really great at pattern gathering, right? So if I say to you now, okay, look around your room, Raelan, and count all the things on your hand that are the color green, you'd be like, okay, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? It'd be quite easy. Yeah. Your brain just goes, okay, I see green. I know green. I'm going to look for it and I'll find 7, 8, 10. When we're ill, the brain does exactly that. Like, look around and find everything that's going to put me at risk of being sick. So basically it changes all of our focus, not on joy and healthy, happy thoughts, but on, well, if I do that, that'll make me sick. If I go there, that'll make me sick. And then when we get symptoms, it's making connections all the time. You did that, that made you sick. You replied to an email from work, that made you sick. But interestingly, you could reply to an email from a friend and that didn't make you sick. Huh. So, that it's making patterns all the time. So I say, I have a kind of protocol around Get your meds, any meds that are going to work for you, great. Supplements that are going to work for you, great. Gut health, great. Let's just get the basics in order. And then when you've kind of run out of ideas, then you've got to come to, I'm going to let my body now learn how to create an environment that is going to be open to healing. So let's work on the nervous system. Let's get your autonomic nervous system regulated. And then the piece that sort of, I like to think of it, comes later is then you go, okay, so now my brain needs help to kind of think like a healthy person again, because it's not, it's stuck in this pattern that changed really, really quickly because it had to adapt. The neuroplastic pathways just changed overnight when you were super sick. And then it needs a bit of help to think like a healthy person again. So, but it's controversial work, and I'm sure we all know people who have been, railed for talking about it and dismissed. And I'm a bit like, okay, that's fine. I think choose where you feel happy, choose where you feel confident, choose where you feel safe. But more and more people are choosing to come to the kind of work that we talk about and go, I'm really ready to learn more about this now. I'm ready to open myself up to this because I've tried everything else and I'm on a plateau or I'm still stuck. So, I mean, I would love to hear from you as well. You've been putting out these incredible interviews for such a long time. What's your response been like? How has that gone down?
It's incredible how it's changed even just over the 5 years that I've been doing this. It is dramatic. I mean, when I first started doing recovery interviews, I still, even though I had recovered, I did not understand my own recovery. I had an idea of what I did. I could tell you the steps, but I couldn't tell you why they worked.
Mm,
So even I was just fumbling around a bit and I was just trying to get some stories out. So I started interviewing people, and initially it felt like there weren't really any themes. It was a little bit all over the place.
ah,
Like I did ayahuasca, I became a carnivore, or, whatever
yeah.
it was.
What a great combo.
But then very quickly there started being patterns that were made me cringe a little bit because I thought people, not from hearing it from the people, but I was just thinking about listeners and viewers because it was things like, I realized I was in a really stressful job. I realized so many things in my life are out of alignment. I had to make some changes. Sometimes it was big things like leaving relationships. Sometimes it was just, a different way of approaching the world. And I just thought there's really sick people watching and they're not watching to hear that, I started meditating and things got better. So I was really nervous about the reaction there.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
there was a lot of pushback in the beginning
Yeah.
too. Like these people were clearly never sick if this
Right.
is what got them to be better. These are fake recovery stories.
Yes.
And then it shifted into a bunch of people talking about brain retraining programs that they did. And we still didn't have really much of the language around it, but it just became, my husband used to ask me really excitedly after each interview, because it was a 10-year battle for me to try and figure out, or a journey of how to recover. And my mom had this for most of her life. And it's just the whole world seemed clueless. So every single person I interviewed was this gem of like, how did they do it? And very quickly he just stopped asking because it was always like some kind of brain retraining. I did the lightning process. But there was so much pushback against that every time I heard that, I again would curl up in a shell because I'm like, the comments are coming my way. Like, no
Yeah.
one's going to
Yeah.
want to hear this. And over the last year or two, it's profoundly shifted in that not only are we hearing the similar themes over most recovery stories, everyone can speak about it articulately. They understand,
Yeah.
the autonomic nervous system and the limbic system and
Mhm.
the amygdala and neuroplasticity and
Yeah.
the alignment in their life, and how this was something that didn't just start with long COVID or even a year or two before. It might have gone from birth or before that. And, so it's just really a fascinating journey to watch
Yeah.
how quickly it's shifting in just
Yeah.
5 years, at least
Yes.
from where I'm sitting.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it's actually really exciting to be in this kind of realm now because, you know, and I know because you're talking with them and interviewing them, more and more doctors are coming on board. And they're more at the specialist level, fine, but at some point this will filter down and people will be able to go to their doctor and talk about the health of their nervous system more than they've been able to ever in life before. And I think it's so important to begin to understand the role of the autonomic nervous system and in health and in sickness, and to be able to look at you as a system that's joined up and not a series of symptoms that have no connection. Because when you start to see, where a dysregulated autonomic nervous system shows up in the body, it's pretty much every single symptom that someone's going to have with something like chronic fatigue, long COVID, these really, really debilitating conditions. They're really showing up in all of the areas that make you go, actually, this fits in to a really simple systemic disruption. And I know, so I think it is also really important to say that there are some people who have other things that they discover on this journey that are going on for them. And I know quite a lot of people who do my program as a kind of maintenance, knowing that recovery isn't an option for them. But they're like, I like doing the work, I like doing the classes, I like being in the community because I finally found something that helps me live a better version of my life. I feel like it's good. It's okay to be ill here, knowing that recovery isn't going to be, a destination for me, but they're working on having a better day, or shifting a sort of a more difficult feeling in their body or something. And I think it's important to go, this is not the cure all for everyone, for everything, but I do see a really big group of people who make huge improvement when they come on board with the whole concept of everything that we're talking about. And suddenly you start to see people kind of growing these roots of like, oh, wow, no, I get it, and I'm starting to say no, and I'm putting boundaries in place around myself, and I'm taking care of myself more, and I might have taken time off work now properly, and I'm not lying on my couch kind of worrying about it. I'm actually resting. This thing that we talk about and we're all so terrible at, I'm doing it properly for the first time. It's like, okay, we're getting the hang of it. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's an important thing that we don't talk about enough because we are so excited to understand this nervous system component, and we see the dramatic improvements that people have with their symptoms when they work with their nervous system. But there are absolutely, of course, people that have physical things going on in their body, pathologies, things that that this isn't going to be the whole answer for, and that can be frustrating for those people to be like, enough with the nervous system. But I always hope and ask and invite people just to stay open-minded, because for one, I think a lot of us write it off too quickly because it sounds too simple and like it doesn't apply to us.
Right.
And
Well, they try the kind of work for 2 weeks and go, it didn't work.
yeah. And
Like,
also, most of the experts out there agree that if you're alive, if you're breathing, nervous system regulation applies to you and will help you to some extent. It's just how much of the needle is going to move for you by focusing on that point. So there's no one out there that this doesn't apply to, whether you are unwell or well. Nervous system regulation is a daily thing, like in line in the grocery store and the person in front of you is moving too slowly, or someone flips you off in traffic. We're training and upregulating and downregulating our nervous system all of the time. So it's a spectrum that we're all on.
Totally. And I think one of the things that breaks my heart is when I see people who are really angry or really afraid and, constantly sort of hyper focused on, I think I'm dying, I think I'm dying. And I'm thinking to myself, it's a really difficult thing to ask a body that is that dysregulated, that is that upset, that is that, laden with cortisol. It's a really difficult thing to ask that body to shift into the healing state. So actually really understanding, even if you don't believe in the power of working with your nervous system, beginning to downregulate the upset around this whole thing is going to be really, really important, because actually it gets in the way of the body doing what it knows how to do, which is, when it can, do some healing work. I'm not saying it's going to heal everything, but it will begin to create the environment in which the body goes, okay, right, I can get to work under the kind of, under the surface. I don't know what my hands are doing here, but I'm kind of stitching things together.
Absolutely. Because at its core, fight or flight is short-term survival. It's not looking at long-term survival. And that rest and digest, as we call it, the parasympathetic nervous system, that's when it gets at the deeper work. So if you're forever in survival mode, in this fear spiral over your condition, which is understandable because it's a terrifying thing to go through. But yeah, it's not putting your body in the state that it needs to be.
Not at all. Not at all.
I'm wondering too, like how as we move forward, all of us that have been through this, I think we used to talk about recovery as this magical finish line that you cross over into utopia and you never have to worry about anything again. But I've definitely learned it's an ongoing
Yeah.
thing. So, and I really had this naive notion once I got better that nothing would ever be hard again, because how could anything be hard compared to CFS?
Right.
Like I can do anything. And then and I'm not going to fall back into my old patterns and habits. And of course, sure enough,
Yeah.
I felt better. Life got hard again. And I fell back into almost all of my old patterns
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
habits.
Yeah.
Fortunately, with enough tools to
Yes.
keep
That's
myself
it.
afloat,
That's it.
but not optimal. So, like,
Mm.
everyone wants to hear when I talk to people, like, we don't talk enough about recovery and beyond. Like,
Right.
what do we do now? What
Mm.
does this look like now? How do I go back into the real world? It's great in my little bubble where I'm focused on my long COVID recovery, but now I'm back at work and I'm
Right.
back at all these things.
So yeah, I mean, I think this is a really common thing. So I have, as part of what I do, I have an 8-week program where we basically go through a bit of a journey, and we work with the neuroplastic stuff, and we work with breath, and we work with body movement, and we gather all of the tools together. And then at the end, I say, right, you're going to now write a prescription for yourself based on everything that you've learned that really you've resonated with, based on the understanding that you've got. Because the minute you're out of community with a group of people who are really focused on this journey with you, you'll forget and you'll let go of the tools, and you'll kind of go, oh, I feel so much better now. I'm just going to go back to doing all the things at the pace I do it, with my try hard driver or my hurry up driver or my perfectionist, and I'm just going to do everything at full pace again. And you'll have thrown all of the learning out of the window, because that's what we want to do. We just want to get back to being super busy and super engaged and go hard at the gym and all the things that people like to do or whatever. And it's super easy to forget. So I say, laminate this and stick it up somewhere where you can walk past it and go, right, what am I not doing at the moment? And I said, your body will be the first thing that tells you you're neglecting. As one would like to think that if you go on a journey, like it's just the slowest journey ever, right? Recovery can be, but you're beginning to learn to notice the sensations, the little, I call them the canaries in the coal mine. So what does your canary sound like when it's singing? Know the sound of the canary. So mine is a pain in my lung, and my lung starts going like, "Arr," and then my heart will also start doing, I call it squirrel in a bag heart, where it's just going like no kind of rhyme or rhythm to it. And I'm like, oh, my canaries are singing. I gotta cancel some stuff. I'm gonna spend the afternoon just hanging out with the dog on the bed. I'll watch some Netflix, and I'm gonna not check social media, and I'm gonna switch back, because I know if I don't pay attention to the canaries in my coal mine, something bigger is coming. And I really encourage people to figure out, what are those little quiet, what are the quiet canaries? What do they sound like? What's happening? Where do they show up? Because your body's always talking to you. It's always talking to you. It's just how much attention you pay to it. That's the key as you go forwards.
That is really well explained. I love that. And people are ask me a lot, like, is your MECFS gone? Like really, really gone? Like for
Mm.
real, is it gone? And
Mm.
it's such a tough thing to answer because yes, I no longer meet any of the diagnostic criteria
Yeah.
for it, but no, in that my nervous system, my canaries still sing. It's
Right.
just
There's a
changed. As
shadow
we
there.
know, that's the nature of, these conditions. They move around and they like,
Yeah.
okay, you're on to that one. So for me, I get lower back pain if I'm
Mm.
spiraling and not taking care of myself. And I hear
Mm.
it and I talk to it and I thank
Right.
it. I'm like, I
Yeah.
hear you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for not laying me out in bed to get my attention. No
Yeah.
need.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Noted. We need to do some stuff, unpack some stuff, take care of
Right.
ourselves, unload a little
Yeah.
bit. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's an ongoing thing. So
It is an ongoing thing. And I think, one of the big learning curves for me was when I got, at sort of 2 years into the long COVID journey, I got an ADHD diagnosis. And I've since been really learning the deep dive around, things like ADHD and the nervous system dysregulation. It's a condition of dysregulation. So already I'm on the back foot, so to speak, with regulation. I'm kind of further down the line, and will always be further down the line than other people who don't have a kind of naturally dysregulated system. So I know I will always have to do my yoga practice, and that's always been a way of slowing myself down. I slow down when I do yoga, and it's one of the few times that I do. I know I will always have to, do some yoga nidra, deep guided rest. I know I will always have to, cancel plans and take time out. And, I'm always going to have to look after myself. And I'm fine with that. It's like, okay, if that's the payoff, great, bring it on. Um, as well, the ADHD piece, the dysregulation of the nervous system, it's also the mast cells that get super stimulated. So a lot of people with ADHD or any kind of neurodivergent kind of, makeup often have more sensitive mast cell, more dramatic mast cell responses to viruses, to stress. And so, kind of knowing yourself as well is really important. Now, if you'd said to me prior to my diagnosis that I had ADHD, I'd have been like, don't be mad. I've been working in the kind of health space and had enough therapy and enough counseling over the years. No one's brought it up. But it wasn't until I spent 2 years talking to a therapist with ADHD who finally went, I think I know what is going on in your mind. And it was a real shocking moment to me. And I think I see a lot of people, especially women, because we're just so great at masking, any kind of neurodivergent behavior because we're very good social adapters on the whole, women, that it was such a kind of like, oh my god. And when you start to see the link there with things like POTS, like loads of people with POTS have some kind of ADHD or neurodivergence and joint hypermobility, that connective tissue disorder. So once you start to realize, oh my goodness, there's patterns with this dysregulation piece, then okay, this is going to be a lifelong commitment to health for me. I can't just get myself to a point where I go, done and dusted, off I go. This is forever. And I'm a bit like, okay, sign me up because, I want to have fun for the rest of my life as much as I can. My job, my commitment to myself.
Yeah, got me thinking about something. We all have, I haven't talked to a single person who's been through a journey like this who hasn't taken massive amounts away from it and had a lot of aha moments. And I'm continually saying that my life over the 6 years since my CFS ended, it's still just been CFS on repeat. Not in that it was the same condition, but it's all the lessons, all the tools, all the aha moments that I have to keep recycling to get me through absolutely everything else. So I'd love to hear, what are some of yours? What are some of the big takeaways that helped you through it and that still serve you in your life now?
Well, I think it brings me back to connection. I think a human being, we're social creatures and we need connection. And I think especially as someone who has, ADHD, I can find it really easy to disconnect myself because, my brain is often a lot for someone else to take on. And so I can lose connection with people really quickly as I kind of, crash my way through life at times. And so for me to have a community now that completely understands that, I can overshare all of the wild things that go on in my mind and in my body. And there's a whole load of people that are also going, yeah, that's happening for me too. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is so great, because then I don't feel as extreme and I don't feel as separated. And, a lot of people are like, oh, you run this program for all of these people. And I'm like, oh, no, I run this program for me. And
I do this channel for me. Everyone's like, it's so great of you to do this. No, it's for me.
Right. And I think, it's a really important thing when you find your way of kind of cathartically processing what's going on for you, right? And that's what I've always thought with your interviews. I can see that you're getting so much from this conversation that you have with another person that knows the lived experience of what you've gone through yourself. And when we find that connection, when we find that understanding, that validation, that empathy, it's kind of mind-blowing. And I'm like, wow, I just hope that I can keep running this literally until the day before I die. And I say the day before because it would be nice to know that I could dedicate the last day of my life to saying goodbye to the people that I love. But, I'm all in right up until one day before. So I think community is so powerful, and we are really in an age where we're isolated a lot. And we need to validate a lot of what we're going through to help us literally to heal all of the days where things are going on that we need to heal from. that we're not talking just big stuff like, I'm healing the fact that, my Amazon delivery got stolen by someone, or I'm healing the fact that, my dog had 14 teeth out and she's really upset. Like all of the things that we deal with on a daily basis, we kind of need to just go, let the pressure off, let the pressure out, release a bit of the tension. And we don't think about it enough, but this journey, as you're talking about, as we're talking about, brings our focus to that a lot. And, so for you, is that what you get from the interviews, that validation, that understanding, that connection?
Oh, so much.
Mm.
First, I just want to, something you just said, I think is really important. Well, a lot of things that you just said, but we talk about how nervous system regulation applies to everyone. If you're alive, if you're breathing, this applies to you. And you talked about, going through life, and we think about trauma, and some people are saying, I don't think I have any trauma. And there's, I heard someone say recently on a podcast that there's the trauma of life, and it
Right.
doesn't matter
Yeah.
what the thing is,
Yeah.
it's your experience of it and how you react to it. And if you've taken time to process it, if you're still carrying it, what it means to you. So everyone has these things that they carry around.
They don't have to be big. They can be just tiny.
Yeah.
I was bullied at school. Would I call that a trauma? I wouldn't have until I've learned more about trauma and what it does to the body, because I have a visceral memory of what it felt like to be pinned to the floor and have, clumps of hair pulled out by this girl. But I would never have gone through my life saying it was a trauma, because we kind of compartmentalize trauma to being these big events from, life, like a major accident or a major abuse event, or, and I'm a bit like, does my bullying count? Yeah, it counts. Does 10 years of being in, a relationship where you feel like you're compromised all the time count? Yeah, it counts. It counts. It all counts. So, yeah.
Yeah, a great example. The podcast I was listening to was the Like Mind, Like Body podcast, which I love. And they gave the example of, you might have seen something on the news that was really traumatic, and that made you feel unsafe. It might not even be something that happened to you. So
Yeah.
we all respond to things
I
differently.
still haven't recovered from the movie Jaws, to be honest. I was taken by someone for their 8th birthday, and it was 3D glasses. And I was 8 years old, very hypersensitive nervous system. I came out of the cinema like that. Oh my God, Mum, this terrible thing just happened and I couldn't look away.
I think a lot of us were traumatized by that.
Right?
Sharks needed a whole new PR agent after that movie, because they were really, really portrayed
Right.
in a terrifying way. Not that
Yeah.
they can't be terrifying, but not like that. But yes.
Sorry,
So
sorry.
to your question, what I get from this channel, and I really hope that people who recover continue watching and listening to recovery stories, because I can't imagine where I'd be if I had 5, 6 years ago, okay, I'm done with ME/CFS and just gone on with my life. I'm sure I'd generally be okay. But I joke that I do this channel for me, but that's not why I started it. I started it because I wanted to get hope out there and insight. And I learned, I've done, I think, almost 250 interviews so far, and there's not a single one that I don't learn something impactful from, something that changes my life, that helps me live a better life. Because so much of recovery from these conditions, especially when nervous system regulation is the large piece of what we're addressing, is about learning all the things to live your life better. It's learning boundaries. It's learning how to live in alignment. It's learning how to see and accept yourself. It's, learning your need for, community and love and connection. And it's, it's all of these 1,000 things. So I love how you said it. I'm going to copy it, borrow it. I would do this until the day before I died. I was reading a book recently by Rachel Hollis called "What If You Are the Answer," and in it she says, and people always asks you, what would you do if you couldn't fail? And she said, ask yourself, what would you do if you knew you would fail? So I thought, if someone told me YouTube was going to shut down next month, or I was going to get canceled, or I'm not trying to speak that into existence, but like if I just this channel is just really not ever going to be anything, I would still do it.
Yeah.
I would still do it, because it gives me a lot of purpose. I love the connection with other people. I love putting hope out there. And I selfishly learned so much from it. So much. Yeah.
Amazing. Oh, amazing. That's so good to hear. Well, listen, YouTube gods, let's not let that happen, okay? It's a really vital resource that you've created here. It's incredible.
Pull that
Definitely.
back out of the air.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, we've talked a bit about the work that you're doing, but not really in depth. So, what are you doing now? What support do you have people who are going through these conditions? What are the different resources that you have for people?
So the thing so I have two things. One is a sort of I call it the big program, because I now employ around, I don't know. Do you know what? I've lost count. I've lost count. Probably shouldn't say that as the leader of a team. I don't know how many people work for me, but I think there's around 30 or 32 teachers now that teach across a timetable that runs 5 days a week. We're actually potentially starting to go on 6 days a week, um, all different time zones, live classes. And that's the thing that I felt was really important, because there's loads of recorded content out there. And, fine. But if you're anything like me, you're going to disengage as soon as the phone rings or someone sends you a text. You'll be like, oh, well, no, I'm going to go and have a snack. And the content runs in the background and you don't give it any attention. So I was like, it needs to be live. And obviously we have it recorded, but live is the kind of primary audience. And you can do anything. So it started out with like yoga nidra and gentle kind of somatic movement and deep rest stuff, because that was all I could do. And then I brought in more teachers and I went, can you lead some mindfulness? So we got some mindfulness teachers in, and then we got breathwork teachers in, and then we've got now qigong, we've got art therapy, we've got a film club, we've got a gardening club, we've
Oh my
got
goodness.
an occupational therapist running sessions, we've got yoga nidra sessions, we've got teachers in New Zealand, in Canada, in Scotland, a lot down near me, because it's kind of nice to be able to meet up. But, pretty much you name it, we probably do it now. We got tapping, EFT, some incredible meditation, and some very kind of Joe Dispenza-esque meditation, which some people who start out, they were like, oh, we don't want to do this. And then they've gone, oh my God, this is changing our lives. I'm like, oh yeah, good. Okay, great. So, we've got everything. And it's the thing that was really interesting to me was when I started, I kind of had a price, which was, the price for the classes that I was putting on. And I've never put that price up. And it was always, I think it was £8 at the time. And then at some point, and that I think they got like 5 classes a week. And then VAT was added, so I put my price down to accommodate 20% more. So now you can get into the program for £5, or you can get in for 9. If you want live, you can go for 9. But I never wanted it to be at a point where people couldn't afford to join, because of course, when you're interacting on Facebook with people who've lost their jobs, their livelihoods, their homes, and then you go, oh my God, they've got no money, and actually all of these people here, they're going to pay for their private specialists, and they're getting this incredible support, even though there's no silver bullet, but they've got money. And then there's a whole lot of people who've got nothing. And I felt really strongly that I wanted to be able to help them. So we've created free spaces for people. And I should be careful saying this on YouTube, but they're going to be like, we want free places. We have a quota of free places for every kind of 100 people that we have. We have, like a few free places, and people can apply through their GP for a referral if they are, eligible for a hardship fund. And we would just say, great, come into the program for free for this period of time, because we do not ever want anyone to feel like they can't access some support. So, my principle has always been to keep the cost low. And actually, I was just talking with my team today saying, when we hit a certain point in numbers with our students, I'm actually going to put the price down to make it more affordable. So whilst, pretty much any medical professional who works in the private space over here in the UK says to me, how come you're so cheap? This is incredible. You should put your prices up. I'm like, I think you're kind of missing the point of why I exist. I exist to offer people support that can't get it anywhere else. And most of those people are off sick and they're not working. And, or they're on a kind of shortened sick pay, and then suddenly they're dropping off the salary down to kind of hardly anything. And I don't want someone to say, I can't do your program because I need to pay for my rent, or I can't do your program because I need to feed myself. And it's like, when we're in that space, come for free. My God.
Yeah.
No one should not be able to afford things that will help support their body learn how to heal better and feel in community. And if there was one thing that they got from it, that they don't feel so isolated. And we have a lot of fun and we play, and I put silly costumes on and sing everyone happy birthday if they show up in my class. It's like you have to have a tribe, and you have to have fun. Otherwise, life gets really hard, and you're sick already. Let's not make it harder. So yeah, really strong values around that.
That is absolutely incredible. And even for people who can afford some programs, many people have already purchased multiple pricey programs and now they're tapped out, and or even just at a point like I can't keep spending money on programs that I don't know if they're going to help, and it's just
Yeah.
so they give up because everything's too expensive. And
Yeah.
so this is amazing, Suzy. Of course, everything will be linked in the description. So for people watching, listening, take a moment, check it out. Oh my goodness. Do whatever you can to get some more Suzy in your life.
So we've got
Oh,
that. So I said there was two things. But let me just tell about the second
oh
one
my
very
goodness, there's
briefly.
more.
Well, that's the big program, and that's the kind of big sprawling 365 days a year kind of thing. We don't
Okay.
we take weekends off, but that's it. And then there's the FERN program, which I realized, again, my kind of coaching thing kind of went, I think people are getting stuck. And actually, I think there was a really interesting point. One of the interviews that I did quite early on, there was a woman who said that the ambulance team had come into her bedroom to collect her, and they'd said to her, these words had landed on her, that she was incredibly unwell and that they had to take her to hospital. And it was almost like she was stuck mentally in that room, despite she was home and she was trying her best to recover. And when I heard her say that, I realized that was the bit that needed to heal first, because she was never going to heal until she'd healed the trauma. It was a trauma. When you're very ill and you're terrified and someone says to you, you're very ill. So, she had a young child and she was like, maybe I'm going to die. And that was just playing on again and again and again and again and again in her head. And I said, we need to look at that first. And that was when I realized the role of coaching was going to be hugely important for some people. And it evolved into the FERN program, which actually is just a reconnection to joy for me. I explain the kind of role of the brain and how it becomes hyper focused. And actually, we need to kind of reprogram it to think and remember that life is good again and that there is joy. And actually, that helps to kind of release the happier hormones, which help to do the stuff with the nervous system that heals, and, kind of how it all makes sense. And so, maybe, I don't know, 3 years ago, I put the FERN program together, and I knew it couldn't be one to one. I knew it had to happen in small community. Again, the power of community, because it's inspiring, and you've got a group of people who are there for you at the end of a WhatsApp group, day and night, if needs be, going, hey, I just did this. I baked a cake, or I'm listening to this song, or, hey, I've just put on a dress I haven't worn for a year and a half. And, I'm lying in bed in it feeling, like it's making me laugh. Because those are the things I encourage people to do. Like, stop doing all of the ill behavior all the time, even though you're ill. Like, go and put some crazy shoes on that you haven't worn for a while and just walk around the house in them for 5 minutes and laugh, like, this is crazy. I haven't, I've got high heels on and I feel really poorly, but like, start to pattern interrupt some of the terrible things that we can get stuck in routine with. Like, put on your fancy pants and lie in bed in them instead, put on your sexy underwear and lie in bed in that, and just be like, this is crazy. You're kind of pattern interrupting and bringing smiles
Yeah.
to yourself. That's so important.
I love this so much. I'm just picturing someone like, I haven't washed my hair in 2 weeks,
Right.
but I've got on my fancy underwear and I've got some high heels.
Check me
It just
out.
snaps you right out of it. And
Exactly.
we always hear the biggest thing. There's many components to this, but one of the biggest things, the best things you can do for yourself is stop trying to recover and shift to just living a little bit again. Nothing sends your nervous system messages of safety more than trotting around your apartment in high heels with a goofy smile on your face.
Right.
Clearly everything's
Exactly.
okay. You're not being
Exactly.
chased by a bear.
Exactly. I encourage people to go back to music that they listened to when they were teenagers and loved, and be like, oh, I loved this album, because it's taking you somewhere so far away from where you are right now. They kind of come back and they go, oh my God, I've been listening to like Wham, and and then we'll have a bit of a kind of reminisce around, whose favorite song was, or which one did you fancy? It's so important to remember joy.
Absolutely love it. And again, all of this linked in the video description. I'm like, can I join this? Is there a
I
version
want to
for?
do my own. Should we let's have one for us. I would love to do the course.
Yeah, that sounds like something we could all use a bit of in our lives. That's really amazing. Well, Suzy, this has been absolutely incredible. I'm thinking of an interview I did with Jackie Baxter, which is just incredible. And I know she works with you in your program. So I'm going to link that over here if people want to check that out. A really amazing woman and a lot of great insights in that one. So thank you so much for being here. And oh my goodness, for everything that you do. The world is such a better place because we have you in it. I have so much gratitude for who you are and what you're doing. And I'm just personally so glad that we've connected. And I hope that you'll come back one day.
Oh, Raelan, it's been an absolute joy. And, I'm sure there's loads of people who are also thinking thank you to you because your recovery stories, I know, because I hear it from my community directly, give them hope. So, back at you, lady.
Wonderful. Well, and thanks to everyone who's watching and listening, and hope to see you in this next interview with Jackie.